Good evening. Thanks for tuning in. I'm Cassandra Johnson from USA Triathlon, and we're here at the Olympic Training Center in Colorado Springs. I'm here with Olympian Andy Potts, who finished fourth at the IRONMAN World Championship in October, his best ever Kona finish, and we're really excited to have the opportunity to chat with him today. Thanks for being here.
Thanks for having me, Cassandra. Hopefully people at home can learn something to apply to their multi-sport lives.
Perfect. Well, we have a lot of questions from readers all over the country. So we'll go ahead and I'm Cassandra Johnson from USA Triathlon, and we're here at the Olympic Training Center in Colorado Springs. I'm here with Olympian Andy Potts, who finished fourth at the IRONMAN World Championship in October. Hello, I'm sorry about that. We had a window open and it was echoing. So we're back and we're ready to get started. We have a lot of questions from readers all over the country, and we'll just dive right in and try to get through as many as we can. So our first question comes from Edwin Croucher, and he says, your Kona run was really special. Did you do anything different on the swim and or bike to get that run?
Well, I guess the reason I was able to run, I thought that I was able to run up to my potential in Hawaii, and I think a lot of that had to do with starting the run with a fairly full tank. I mean, obviously, you're getting onto your feet, and for me, it's about 5.5 hours into the race, and my tank was probably about half full, which you've got about less than 3 hours to empty the full tank. And if you're have as much fuel as possible, good things will happen. I think it was a testament not only to my running, but I think it is a testament to my riding as well, because the ride didn't just totally tax me. So when you're preparing for a race, sometimes the hard work in a specific discipline doesn't necessarily show up every time, but that doesn't mean that the hard efforts aren't in you and aren't in your system or in your muscles. I would say you need to continue to explore your boundaries as an athlete, and sometimes your best bike comes from spending a little bit more time on your swim. So when you stand up out of the water, you're not as gassed. People sometimes ask me why I try so hard on the swim, and a lot of it has to do with me being a strong swimmer, but I also want to race to my strengths, and I also want to have it take the least out of me so I can get to the really important parts of the race tactically with a lot of bullets left to fire.
Great. So our next question comes from Kate Jordan from Pennsylvania. She says, super job in Kona. What drink did you have in your Nathan handheld bottle, and was your headband for sweating or styling?
There you go. All right, 2 in 1. So I train with Power Bars Perform, and a huge reason why is because it's what's served on course, so my body is familiar with it. And just like a lot of things in life, you can train towards certain things to be better prepared, and your gut is very trainable. So I train with the Power Bars Perform drink, and that was what was in the Nathan bottles. I also had there was a little pouch as well, so I had a little bit more solids. I had a couple bars, and then the blends as well from Power Bar in the handheld. And then my headband, it was something I had been experimenting with for about 5 months, and it was a cooling headband that I kind of cut for my head. It ended up working great because every time I got to an aid station, I said to myself, all you're here is just to cool down, get cool. So I'd take a sponge, or I'd take like 5 sponges. I'd take 5 sponges, 2-hand it, squeeze them on top of my head. I'd take ice, shove it down my chest or down my back, and then it was just dump. Mostly I would go through aid stations just to cool myself. And the reason I could do that was because in Kona, we have our professionals have their own hydration stations every 5K. We have a hydration station just for us, so we can prepare our own bottles with our own mix and we knew what we were getting, and I could use the other aid stations to cool off. So every time I dumped sponges or water on my head, my headband act as a coolant, and it kept me cool because it's pretty warm there.
Nice. Very cool. Well, our next question comes from Susan Ock from Largo, Florida, and it's about overcoming injury. She says, I know you missed Kona last year due to injury, but came back stronger than ever this year. I am missing a race due to knee surgery 3 weeks ago, and I'm really down. Any tips would be appreciated.
Wow, I don't think you can avoid the roller coaster for the emotions that happen when the expectations of the opportunity to race are taken away from you. I would try to kind of temper the expectations a little bit as you recover, but you can recover stronger than ever. And if my performance in Kona this year can be a source of inspiration, being a better you than ever before, that'd be wonderful. I would say try to keep an even keel. Don't let a good day or a bad day get you too high or too low. Know that you're progressing through each effort just to become a little bit more proficient, and learn from your mistakes. Even if the injury wasn't something that you did on purpose, sometimes injuries happen, and you can learn how to either stretch better, eat better, but probably most importantly, recover better.
Great, thank you. And so Eugene Yates from Baker City, Oregon asks, what's your sleep pattern leading up to Kona? What time do you turn in and wake up in the days leading up to the event?
So I try not to throw too many wrenches into the mix when I'm getting ready for a big race. I try to keep bedtime really close, probably within 15 minutes of each other. And the way that I do it is I have young children, and we have them on a decent schedule. We're not perfect parents by any stretch of the imagination, but I try to go to bed about 15 minutes after my kids, and then they kind of wake me up. So they're kind of metronomes, little kids. They dial it in. They usually get, like my kids, they get about 10 to 11 hours a night. So I'm about 10, well, I'm a little bit more like 11 and a half a night. But I get a lot of sleep because that's where I know the biggest gains are made. Gains aren't necessarily made in in a hard effort. The gains are made in how you recover from a hard effort in training or racing. So the better you recover, the better you can prepare and train.
Great. Next up, Lori Denning from South Jordan, Utah asks, what was your first motivation to start triathlon, and what is your biggest motivation now?
My motivations change with the seasons. They change with the ebb and flow of life. When I did my first triathlon, it was back in 2002, and it just so happens it was in Colorado Springs, where I now reside. I was living in Chicago at the time, but I came out here to hike some mountains, and there was a triathlon close by, and I entered, and I did it because I wanted to see what all the hype was, what I could experience in the multi-sport world. I really enjoyed the vibe, but I did it to try something new and also to try to get the most out of myself. I think the biggest change for me in terms of motivation has been, I still like getting the most out of myself, no doubt about it. I want to see kind of what new experiences I can have in multi-sport and triathlon, whether that be draft legal racing, half Ironman, Ironman. I wouldn't rule out off-road racing for myself or something even more endurance related, but because I like to push myself. But I've found inspiration in other avenues. Having children is inspiring for me, to kind of show them that their mom, my wife, and I are living the way that we teach them. So we teach them to, embrace new opportunities, embrace challenges, how to deal with defeat, how to, be gracious in victory. There are a lot of really great examples that we've had the opportunity to show our kids, not just tell them about, but show them and triathlon has provided the opportunity. So my kids are a huge inspiration for me.
Eric Castaldo from Gainesville, Florida says, I find myself battling mental fatigue and burnout at the end of the season. Does this happen to you, and how do you combat it?
Yeah, so mental fatigue, it happens to everybody, and there's no real avoiding it. And there are a couple different motifs in the mental fatigue. So there's daily mental fatigue, and that can be easily combated with diet and nutrition. Not only what you're eating, but how you're eating, and the timing that you're eating it. So it's kind of a couple different variables to get through the day. I find the first thing to go in a hard workout is my mind. My mind starts to wander, and then my muscles kind of follow suit. It's like, oh, you have less focus today. And that usually tells me, I need to fuel a little bit earlier, and then I start playing a little bit of catch up. And so that's on a daily basis. As for the season, I've had some times at the end of the season, I really struggle to find the why behind my racing. And a couple of years ago, I sat down with my coach, and he was like, I want you to be excited to race every time you get on the start line. So don't underestimate the power of being excited. If you find that your excitement and anticipation towards a race is kind of waning, that's a sure tell sign that maybe you have overextended yourself in other areas of your life or in triathlon. And you kind of have to time your peaks and when you race. I've actually probably pulled out maybe 3 or 4 races in my calendar over the past maybe 4 or 5 years per year. Most races I've ever done in the year is 18. Now I do about 7, 8, or 9 races a year, and I find that I'm more excited to do them, and it shows.
Ben Thomason from Ellensburg, Washington says, my first full Ironman will be Whistler 2015.
Okay.
Nutrition during a race is something I struggle with. Any suggestions?
All right, so my biggest suggestion is to experiment in training. I'm sure you've heard it before, but I will reiterate it. When it comes to nutrition, you don't want to really necessarily try too many new things on race day, or don't try anything new on race day. So experiment in training. I would try solids and liquids. I guess a big thing that I could share with you guys is how I consume gels. So I use power gels from PowerBar, but there are multiple gels out on the market, and the viscosity on a gel is a lot higher than a liquid. So what I do is I'll take maybe a 24-ounce bottle, and it will depend on how hot the day is. So if it's a really hot day, I'll put about 5 gels in. If it's a cooler day, I'll do 3 gels. So let's say in Hawaii this year, I'll just use that as an example. I used 4 gels for 24 ounces. So I put 4 gels in, then a regular serving of PowerBars Perform, and then the rest with water, and kind of shook it up. And that's what I use as my fuel on the bike. It lowers the viscosity on the gel, but it doesn't dilute the calories that you're getting, so you still get all the calories. A trick I use also is so you don't chuck it in one of the aid stations thinking it's just another bottle. I write with a Sharpie in big black, fuel, don't throw me away. So I have it all the way through till special needs, and I get a brand new one of the same concoction. Watering down a gel, especially if it gets caught in your tummy, or if it's really you're not tolerating well, maybe your sphincters are tightening a little too much when you're consuming gels, you can lower the viscosity by watering it down.
Okay. Our next question comes from Jason Johnson from Madison, Wisconsin, and he said, what was your hardest transition on to triathlon coming from a swimming background?
All right, so it's a good question. Lots of people enter this sport with different heights on the hurdles that they need to clear to be able to call themselves a triathlete. So for some people, the hurdle in swimming is really high. For me, that hurdle is, it barely came up off the ground. And so it depends on your background, but sometimes it's the swimming hurdle is super high. Sometimes the biking is high. Sometimes it's running, like, hey, I'm not a runner, and my bones just can't handle it. And then for other people, it'll be the mental hurdle. How do I juggle 3 sports? I don't know if I can make it that far. It's a daunting distance or a daunting course. Mentally, they just start to struggle. Some of it is nutritional hurdles are higher than others. I'd say the highest hurdle for me was learning how to push on a bike. I had a good rhythm. I knew how to breathe. I knew how to push with swimming. I transferred that rhythm, that breathing rhythm, that ability to kind of tap into a really hard effort onto the run. And then it was a big challenge for me to say, okay, how do I translate my swimming and my running into my cycling? And how do I become a better breather on the bike? How do I get more comfortable on the bike so I can push? So that was the highest hurdle. And it still continues to be to this day. The biggest area for growth for me is on the bike. And I want to be able to ride faster than I am.
Thank you. Jay Nielsen from Denver. If you weren't earning a living as a top 10 pro, what would you rather be doing?
I'd be in the sports world for sure. I think sports teach a lot of great lessons, life lessons that trickle into other aspects of my daily life. So I'll be in sports. I'd probably be coaching. I don't know if I would coach multi-sport. I probably would. But I grew up as a swimmer, so maybe I'd be on the pool deck and have a tri team on the side, something like that. I've heard of a few people that have done it, and it's pretty motivating for them to get up out of bed in the morning. The thing for me is I want to be excited to get up and better myself every day. So that'll be my challenge, to find a profession, find a vocation that gets me excited.
Jennifer Smith-Lawson from Plymouth, Michigan says, what is one piece of advice you would give someone just starting out? I've done one sprint and I'm looking to do an Olympic distance next year.
Okay, one piece of advice. There's so much gear. People will bog you down with questions about nutrition. But ultimately, it comes down to what your parents taught you, starting probably kindergarten, first grade, second grade, even though they didn't say it, but it was time management. How do you manage your time so you can get the most out of each and every day? Unfortunately, we all have 24 hours to deal with. Some days I wish were 30 hours in the day. There aren't. But some days I do have those days where I wish there were only 10 hours today because this is a hard day. But it's time management, and how do I fit in training for 3 different disciplines, managing my job. I've got a family. I actually like my friends. I want to hang out with them sometimes. So you'll have to double dip in some areas. And if you have an hour and a half to work out, my suggestion to you would be to tackle 2 disciplines, whether that be run, swim, bike, run, swim, bike. Try to tackle 2 disciplines in your workout. So you're kind of confusing your body, you're changing up your focus for your mind, and you keep the livelihood of, or the lightness of training to improve, working out to improve, really light. You keep it light and keep it exciting.
Tom Wildenberg from Menasha, Wisconsin says, what's your best piece of advice for taming Alcatraz?
Oh, okay, so in Alcatraz, it's probably my favorite race. The Escape from Alcatraz is every June-ish. Sometimes we'll have to move it based off of what the city of San Francisco has planned for the year. But taming Alcatraz is all about, it's more about your mind than it is about your body. Don't get me wrong, it's really taxing on your body. But there's a huge, it's probably the triathlon's version of extreme sports when it comes to one of our most extreme races. And it's because you're jumping off of a boat, a perfectly good boat, into cold water, dressed like a seal, making a lot of splash. Then you got to tackle the hills in San Francisco. I'd say and I would recommend this for any race. It's think about the activity that you're doing at the time. Try not to focus on riding in the hills when you just jumped off the boat. Try not to think about, your T2 when you're not even at halfway through the bike. You try to be present in every moment. And that's probably my suggestion to anyone, whether they're tackling Alcatraz, their first triathlon, or an
Ironman. Peggy Flannery says, what one thing do you think triathletes should generally work on to improve swim time, not just technique?
Okay. My college coach, he was a fantastic coach, awesome guy. He's in the International Swimming Hall of Fame. His name is John Urbanchek. He coached at the University of Michigan. And he always said the only way to swim fast is to swim fast. So if you just want to get faster, you're not worried about flailing in the water, you don't care about how you look, the only way to swim fast is to actually train swimming fast. And I would add in there that if you have good technique, it's a lot easier to go faster. So technique needs to be a part of it. It's a very technical sport when it comes to time in the water, hand positioning, rotation, body positioning, how you breathe, when you breathe. But the only way to swim fast, as John Urbanchek said, is to swim fast.
Great. Daniel Tego from Brooklyn, New York says, what is the funniest thing that has ever happened to you on race day?
All right. Well, I've had a few giggles to myself on race day, and I've probably made a few people laugh with my antics on race day. Probably one of the more amusing scenes I create, not intentionally by any stretch of imagination, is I do some breathing techniques before the whole race kicks off, just to kind of, it's kind of like packing my body with O2, getting my muscles primed for the day is kind of the mentality behind it, but it's pretty spastic looking, so I look pretty silly. Lots of people think I'm having issues, but I'm not. And then sometimes every funny story when it comes for triathlon, there's always a funny story when it has to do with going to the bathroom. So I've had, when you race 150, 200 times, you're going to have issues. And I've had issues on the race course, whether it was right before the race, right after the race, during the race. When you got to go when nature calls, you got to go. They make for really funny stories, probably not suitable for public consumption, but they make for good, really funny stories around the, well, probably not around the dinner table, but yeah.
Dirk Pauly says, now that Kona is behind you and being able to see your results from the past couple of years, what are you doing to continue the improvement you've seen? And oh yeah, go blue.
Go blue. To continue to improve, I don't see a shortage of things I need to improve on. Trying to get better, even as a swimmer. And it's probably, I gave up a little bit on my swimming this past year to focus on my riding and my running. I think ultimately when I looked at the challenge of the day, for me in the way I race, I would spend at my major race 8% of the time in the water. And was it a really smart thing to spend 30% of my work week training on swimming? And so I kind of cut back on my swimming to spend a little bit more time in the saddle and out on the roads or the trails on my running. I still see the biggest source for improvement is on the bike for me. I thought I would ride better in Hawaii. I've been riding my bike a lot and riding it well. But I think what I didn't see in terms of speed on the bike, it ended up playing out and serving its role on the run, because I was able to show how I can run because I wasn't as blown out on the ride. So for me, biggest area for improvement is my cycling. I think that just means more hours on the bike, but it's also quality as well. So I'll probably maintain the same percentage of my time on the bike doing quality work, but I would just do a I'll be on the bike longer. So that percentage will, it's probably about 35–40% of my time on the bike is really quality. And so that percentage will stay the same. I'll just be on my bike more. Hopefully that'll translate.
Alan Ferragino from St. Helena, California says, congratulations on such a strong finish to your season. I appreciate all the training and commitment that it takes to achieve such results. Your performance was a wonderful display of great skill and execution. Thank you very, very much for answering our questions. And his question is, how can a racer balance the desire to race every weekend with the commitment to train for long course events?
Racing every weekend is tough. I wouldn't recommend racing every weekend. I think that, you really need to find what lights you up, what really motivates you. And sometimes you have to give up the short-term fun activities or short-term rewards for a long-term gain. And it's a lot easier said than done, believe me. I had moments this year where I thought to myself, I don't want to sell out my whole year for a single race, but I really want to do well in Hawaii. So there is going to be a give and take along the way. Sometimes you don't get what you want. I certainly am a prime example of that, but I've gotten enough throughout my career to realize, there's a purpose behind my racing, and there's a purpose behind when I choose to race and where I choose to race. And a lot of it has to do with connecting with people, sharing experiences, and trying to get the most out of myself. So kind of maybe think a little bit harder on the timing of when, not so much how much.
Good advice. Daniel from Fountain Valley, California says, it was great seeing you in Oceanside last Sunday. How do you cope with cramps? I find myself often cramping on the run.
Yeah, so cramping is it's an issue that, because it's really hard to train at a high level and to prepare for a race, it's really hard to dig into that race speed on a consistent basis. So you're putting a ton of stress on your body and introducing a different stimulus like either nutrition or heightened anxiety, stress with a race, or just lots of commotion, or when things get tighter during races. There are things that you just can't prepare for in training. But the human body is an amazing organism. You can train your mind, you can train your muscles, you can train your gut. You can train so many different aspects of it. You can train your skin to not get burnt if you live in sun-soaked areas. So I would look at the stimulus that you're providing during training and trying to replicate some of what's happening during a race, and experiment. You are an experiment of one, and what works for you may not work for the next person. So I would try out different things in training and see what works. Make small notes, even if you're not writing them down. Put them into memory, and you can really try new things in training if you want. I know it's not the best advice, but I try new things in races. Maybe it's one variable at a time, though. If you change multiple variables, it's hard to associate the boost in performance or what went wrong or what went right. So I try to change one thing, and maybe it's a small thing, maybe it's a big thing, but I do try to change things up as I go through and progress as an athlete. And whether I change them in training, change them in racing, there's a first time for everything. So I hope the ailments kind of subside as you experiment with your body, and I wish you the very best.
Thank you. Yeah. And that's about all we have time for today. So thank you so much for your time and chatting with us, and thank you to everyone who's tuned in watching. And so we'll also be drawing one name from someone who submitted a question for our Breed Project helmet, and you can look on social media tomorrow to see who won that. And yeah, thank you again.
Thank you, Cassandra. Thank you, everybody out there. All the best. Hope to see you at the races.